Welcome to Star TV News, the headlines this hour with me, Memuniju Fadera. President Barrow urges Gambians to nurture the spirit of Senegambia relationship. TRRC heading to Fonyi after Jamburu natives complete heartbreaking TRRC showdown. Ex-budget chief calls on NAM to reject proposal of $34 million increase in president's budget. Nabul Larut Suki to appear in a court case involving Gambia and Myanmar at the World Court. Now at the international scene, DR Congo violence, dozens killed by rebels in Beni. At least 12 million children suffering in Yemen war. Ukraine-Russia relations Darwin ahead of talks. Those were the headlines, and now the news in details. The Gambian president, Adama Barrow, has given strong warnings to the press against inciting violence in the country, adding that his government will not compromise with the peace and stability of the country at all times. Jacqueline Colley reports.
He made these warnings at the Pakunda, Sabajalang constituency of the North Bank region of the country, where he was accorded befitting welcome by the people of Sabajalang, characterized with cultural displays from his Boston supporters. The Gambian leader is currently on his annual Meet the People tour, thus engaging the Gambians on his government and policies, as well as general first-hand information on how matters stands in the country. I am urging the press to be mindful when carrying out their duties. Our peace and stability cannot be compromised. Don't write a story that will incite violence among Gambians. All that Gambians have is this country, President Barrow emphasizes. However, President Barrow thanked the press for their dedication and selfless service it continues to render towards the development of the country, adding that anyone who wants to work with his government have to be peaceful because he stands for peace and stability of the country. President Barrow also dilated on the milestone achievement registered by his government with a scope of 3 years, disclosing that his 3-year-old government has made more achievements than the combined period that former President Sarada Keraba Jawara and Yahya Jammeh had achieved. I have received in 3 years more than what my previous colleagues did in 50 years, and it's left to the Gambians to decide whether I should continue or not, President Barrow told the Dipakunda meeting. Speaking at the occasion, Chief Malik Boy stated that the people of Sabajalang are against the 3 years Jatna movement, arguing that the movement has no moral legal basis to force the president to surrender power by December as inscribed in the Coalition 2016 agreement that brought him to power. Jacqueline Colley, Star TV News.
Gambian leader President Adama Barrow has called on nationals to nurture the fruitful bilateral relationship between the Gambia and Senegal, arguing that Gambia and Senegal are one people who share everything together, except for the fact that the two countries are divided by political borders. Dado Cham files in this report.
President Barrow made the revelation at the border village of Ndowin in Nyani District, Central River region of the country on his day 4 of the Meet the People tour, where he advises Gambian security men to be vigilant when dealing with Senegalese nationals. President Barrow disclosed comes in the heels of mounting criticism heaped in certain Gambian security personnel bent on harassing Senegalese citizens living in Ndowin village, as well as other border checkpoints across the country. Gambia and Senegal have come a long way. We are one people with the same culture and speak the same languages, which is a blessing. We have to continue to live a peace and harmony as we have done over the years, President Barrow said. President Barrow also attacked opponents of his regime who are trying every effort to see the end of his regime, urging that such people should wait for the 2021 election in order to buy their way to State House, but not through the back way. There are some people who want to be presidents today just as I am, which is impossible without election. There cannot be 2 presidents in the country. Nowhere in the world would you find that. So I advise to them is to wait for the 2021 election by which is in the ground. Whoever wins will be crowned president, he said. Hamad Nkeba, Minister of Tourism and Culture, also condemned in the strongest term the harassment meant into Senegalese nationals at the border village of Ndowin, adding the government would not allow such behavior from security officers posted at the borders. We are aware of some of the bad behavior meant out in Senegalese citizens living in Ndowin by our Gambian security officers. The Gambia and Senegal are one people, as so by our 2 heads of state. We want to appeal to you securities to stop harassing Senegalese citizens at the border of checkpoint in the Gambia for document purposes. This is abnormal and will not be accepted by the government, Honorable Ba disclosed at the Ndowen meeting. He added, "We are aware of this regrettable act are strongly condemned. Norway has been home for many Senegalese citizens over the years, and we must do everything to jealously safeguard this fruitful relationship between our two countries." Speaking on behalf of the youth, Kara Abdullah Sise said the youths of Nyani are strongly against the idea of the 3 years Jotna movement, adding that the people of Nyani are against any form of violence meant to remove the democratically elected government of the country. "We are saying no to 3 years. Nyani is against the act of violence of people. We called and stand for peace and therefore support the president's 5 years mandate." Reporting for Star TV News, I am Dado Cham.
The TRRC ended its public hearings in Jambur with dozens of natives giving harrowing accounts of what they went through in the hands of ritualists who stormed Jambur in 2009 in their hunt for witches. More with Bintakoli.
Women as old as 90 years detail how they were stripped and battered by young boys. They also explain how the witch doctors forced them to drink disgusting liquids which has since caused the death of many victims. Those alive have health complications. Dozens of men were also not spared as they were also arrested and taken to Kololi where they were forced to drink a bitter liquid. Next week, the TRRC will take its public hearing to Sibanor in Fonyi Bintankaranai. Former President Jammeh's 2009 witch hunt exercise began in Fonyi with hundreds of people reported to have been kidnapped, beaten and forced to drink a concoction. Many have since succumbed. The exercise was carried in almost all Fonyi villages and Sintet is said to be have hit hardest by the exercise. In Batabud Kantora, older natives spent the entire day in the bush in an attempt to evade the ritualists. Bintakoli, Star TV News.
Former Budget Director Mamadou Sabali has called on Gambian lawmakers to reject a proposal of $34 million increase in the budget allocated to the Office of the President for the fiscal year 2020. Sabali made this call in an open letter addressed to the Minister of Finance on the proposed budget for 2020. Our reporter Jacqueline Colley reports.
While admitting that our budget situation is very difficult due to the microeconomic realities on the ground, the former Presidential Affairs Minister urged that recent policy moves championed by the current Finance Minister is worsening the budget situation and the economy of the country in general. He said, "The increase in the budget of the Office of the President by $34 million is wrong. We all know the problem of dealing with that budget head, knowing the difficulty of satisfying the political animal in that office. But the wisdom has always been to constrain the presidency ad minutio and then manage the situation as the budget implementation cycle unfolds. By expanding expenditure for the presidency, you are simply pampering your boss for political patronage at the expense of the taxpayer. The increase in salaries at the Office of the President is also a waste of resources. We know that the problem at that office is being compounded by further expanding the bureaucracy of an already dysfunctional office instead of taking the tough decision of deploying or firing all the square pages in round walls." While clarifying that his call for deputies to vote down the proposed increase in resources allocated to the presidency was not for political reasons and urging the deputies to treat it as a non-partisan matter. Sabali emphasizes, "I would surely recommend that the deputies at the National Assembly cancel the proposed increase of expenditure under the Office of the President to set a perfect example and send a message to the executive that the meager resources of our taxpayers cannot be used for Mumbai in these trying times." He further admonished the Finance Minister as follows, "The executive has for long trodden on the poor taxpayers for too long. Now that the taxpayers have voted to have something much better than what used to obtain in the past, we cannot afford to repeat the mistakes of yesterdays. If the Mandinka saying that "Sila koto kata sate koto leto" is nothing to go by, then you are leading this country back into the doldrums of physical obstinacy. We can do better than this. So let us strive to make the future government with a scope of 3 years." Disclosing that his 3-year-old government has made more achievements.
According to Reuters news agency, Aung San Suu Kyi will appear before the International Court of Justice, ICJ, to contest a case filed by Gambian accusing Myanmar of genocide against its Rohingya Muslim minority. More than 730,000 Rohingya Muslims have fled to neighboring Bangladesh since 2017 crackdown by Myanmar's military, which UN investigators says was carried out with genocidal intent. Buddhist majority Myanmar denies accusation of genocide. Dado Chan reports.
Gambia launched its lawsuit after winning the support of the 57-nation Organization for Islamic Cooperation, OIC. Only a state can file a case against another state at the ICJ. Myanmar has retained prominent international lawyers to contest the case submitted by...
And now on the international scene. After years of protest and political turmoil, voters in Guinea-Bissau are hoping Sunday's presidential election will finally lead to peace. The incumbent, Jose Maria Vaz, wants another term despite failing to stabilize the economy of West African nation and to deal with the growing illegal drug trade. But he says he will respect the result even if he loses. Al Jazeera's Nicholas Haig reports from the outskirts of the capital, Bissau.
A last-ditch effort to cling on to power. In this campaign, incumbent President Jose Maria Vaz calls himself the man of the people, the one that can bring peace and stability to the nation. But his mandate has been anything but stable. After dismissing all 8 of his government since taking office in 2014, he called on the military to step in on his behalf. Days before the election, fear of a military coup still looms. As night falls, hundreds gather to hear him speak. Among the crowd are West African troops from Nigeria and Senegal, here as a stabilizing force to keep a close watch on Vaz and his military entourage. Vaz says we have to get to work together to bring an end to the political crisis, accusing foreign powers of wanting to steal the country's wealth, and tells the crowd to be careful with fake news. He then invites us on stage. What was supposed to be a one-on-one interview is used to galvanize the crowd. Micro.
See this journalist? He accuses me of creating instability. I tell you what, you have to be careful with what you say. Listen, I will accept the election results, even if I lose.
With 20 attempted military coups and dozens of political assassinations, never has there been a peaceful transition of power since Guinea-Bissau's return to democracy 25 years ago. The United States Drugs Enforcement Agency believes Latin American drug traffickers are profiting from the political instability. Senior military commanders in cahoots with elected politicians are using the harbor to facilitate the smuggling of drugs from Latin America through Guinea-Bissau to Europe. During Vaz's time in office, 25 tons of cocaine was seized. Still, his political opponents accuse him of using cocaine money to finance his re-election campaign, an accusation he denies.
They say drug money has made it into the campaign. We have to make an effort to end this. Vote for me, and starting November 24th, no drugs will enter Guinea-Bissau.
Jose Maria Vaz is about to become the first president of Guinea-Bissau to complete his mandate. But as the campaign comes to a close, he seems even more determined to hold on to power by any means possible for as long as he can. Nicholas Hawk, Al Jazeera, Bissau.
United Nations peacekeepers in the Democratic Republic of Congo have been blamed for failing to stop rebels from killing dozens of villages in North Kivu province this month. Congolese regional leader says the Allied Democratic Forces, ADF, have killed dozens of people this month. Thousands of Congolese in Beni have flew after the ADF raided their villages. The UN says it is doubling its efforts to fight the army group. Al Jazeera's Raula Bodin mainly reports.
Protesters carried crosses for Congolese killed, kidnapped and beaten by armed rebels in the northeastern region of Beni. The target of their anger is the United Nations. They say UN peacekeepers have failed to protect them from attacks by the Ugandan rebel group, the Allied Democratic Forces, or the ADF.
We are on the street to denounce the inability of the United Nations to protect the population according to its mandate. The protest will continue until they leave Beni.
We'll continue to protest until we have a solution against the killing. It's not acceptable to see people killed while the UN forces are present in Beni.
At least 64 Congolese have been killed since the army launched a large-scale operation against the ADF at the end of last month. The ADF is one of dozens of armed groups vying for territory and control in the mineral-rich border region. In Boakin, on the outskirts of Beni, witnesses say ADF fighters used machetes to kill 12 people on Tuesday. Here too, Congolese say they weren't protected. But the UN says it's ready to support Congolese efforts against armed groups.
We're ready to support the armed Congolese forces in the fight against these rebels. But it's important to start with a plan in order to conduct joint operations. We are here for that, and it's our mandate to help.
Army commanders in Beni region say they've almost doubled the number of troops to 21,000 to confront the ADF. But many villagers say even with their presence, people are still being killed.
We are disappointed. We thought we would see one ADF fighter killed because there was no escape, so they crossed the road full of soldiers. Only one policeman intervened by shooting in the air. The soldiers didn't support him.
The European Commission has recorded more than 2,500, mostly women and children, fleeing ADF raids in Beni city. And the funerals of Congolese killed this week have been postponed. Local leaders fear the burials will cause more anger and violence in an already troubled region. Laura Burden-Manley, Al Jazeera.
As the world marks International Children's Day, children in Yemen do not have much to celebrate. The nearly 5-year-long war has created what the United Nations calls the world's largest humanitarian crisis. It says at least 12 million children are caught up in the fighting and need outside help. Al Jazeera's Lahila Mahmoud reports.
Children exposed to daily attacks in Yemen. Dozens gathered outside the United Nations, demanding an end to Saudi airstrikes and its crippling blockade. According to the UN, tens of thousands like them die every year from the effects of the crisis and starvation. But for a day at least, there's respite for some through football.
We played sports and received watches as presents. We hope and urge everyone to work together to end the war and be united.
I hope the Sana'a airport opens soon so I can travel to Qatar to watch the World Cup.
The sounds of gunshots and explosions have become an everyday reality for millions of Yemenis. Parents try to comfort those too young to understand the conflict. UNICEF says that Yemen is the worst place in the world to be a child. And this is the scene shortly after a school bus was hit in an airstrike last year. 40 children on board were killed. Activists say, for children, the conflict is getting more dangerous.
More than 7,500 children have been killed by direct targeting, and many other children and women have died because of the spread of diseases, malnutrition, and without access to medicine. Around 200,000 to 300,000 patients are in need of treatment abroad, and right now, 1 million people are at risk of getting cholera.
The conflict between the Saudi-backed coalition and the Houthis have been raging for almost 5 years. But those children caught in the middle can only hope they won't be forgotten. Rahila Mohammed, Al Jazeera.
In Ukraine, relations between the government and Russia appear to be down ahead of talks scheduled for next month before a face-to-face meeting between President Volodymyr Zelensky and his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin. The two sides have been carrying out confidence-building measures to reduce tensions. Al Jazeera's Andrew Chappell has more.
While his name is often being mentioned in Washington at Donald Trump's impeachment inquiry, Ukraine's president appears focused on signaling that the conflict with Russia must end. Volodymyr Zelensky unveiled a bridge that's been rebuilt in a community on the front line in eastern Ukraine. Government forces and Russian-backed separatists blamed each other for destroying it 4 years ago. Observers hope the new bridge is an optimistic sign.
There should be a serious truce and serious ceasefire where there is no shooting. That's how I understand it. There must be a serious agreement with clear terms and obligations.
The bridge over the Donets River is one of 5 that Ukrainian civilians can use to cross into territory controlled by separatists. They control the eastern parts of Donetsk and Luhansk, Russian-speaking areas known as the Donbass, part of the 7% of Ukraine under control of Russia and its allied forces. In another sign of thawing relations, Russia returned 3 Ukrainian Navy vessels captured last year, although stripped of their communications and navigation equipment. Russian border guards fired on the gunboats a year ago and captured 24 Ukrainian sailors. The incident in the Kerch Strait was so serious, then President Petro Poroshenko declared martial law, apparently fearing an all-out Russian invasion. Since Russian troops invaded and annexed the Crimea region 5 years ago, at least 13,000 people have been killed and almost 30,000 wounded. Poroshenko's successor says he's determined to revive the peace process. The Kremlin released the captured sailors a couple of months ago, followed by both sides beginning to withdraw from frontline areas in eastern Ukraine.
What's my relationship with Zelensky like? I don't have one. I've never met him. We don't know each other. We've talked on the phone. I think he's a nice and honest person. I really believe that he wants to change the situation for the better, including in Donbass.
Soon, the focus will turn away from impeachment hearings and symbolic handovers to a summit planned in Paris on December the 9th. That's when Ukraine, Russia, France, and Germany will discuss how to end the conflict once and for all. Andrew Chappelle, Al Jazeera.
And before we end the news, a recap of our main headlines. President Barrow urges Gambians to nurture the spirit of Senegambia relationship. TRRC heading to Fonyi after Jambu natives complete heartbreaking TRRC showdown. Ex-budget chief calls in NAMS to reject proposed $34 million increase in president's budget. Noble Larit Shuki to appear in a court case involving Gambian and Yamar at the World Court. That's all for this edition of today's news. Please enjoy the rest of our programs and join us tomorrow for more news. Thank you.